The Everything Sequel Podcast is brought to you by the Vegas Beer Guys and the Everything Sequel Podcast. The Everything Sequel Podcast contains explicit language. 'Cause we learned it from you, Dad. Hello and welcome to the Everything Sequel Podcast. This is a Dollars edition. Dollars edition? Dollars, good, bad, ugly? BGU? No, this is a Dollars edition. My name is Michael Shantz of the How Dare You Awards. Joining me, the man ready to shoot my hat, Tom Stewart of Lonesome Whistle Productions. Say hello, Tom.
Why are you looking at me when you say one of us? Even though I didn't represent it with that impersonation, there's a naturalism to Clint's acting in this particular movie that reminds me he got a lot more arch later on in his career. Like, you know, don't get me wrong, Arch Clint is everything, right?
Yeah, right.
That's it's, as we said in the previous episode, he molded the modern day action hero with his arch acting, but there's something about him coming out of television and being a character actor at that point that
I think he's still filming
right
the television show while he's doing these movies, right?
Because sometimes it's just like looking at, it's like watching any other actor
right
in these movies, which is not normally a response you get when you see Clint Eastwood.
When you're thinking Clint, yeah.
It's a very specific kind of acting, which is not wrong, but it's not how most people do it.
Yeah.
Whereas I think, yeah, I could see how he would like blend in a TV Western as a supporting character. And I don't really think that about anything, you know, in his 70s and 80s and 90s work.
All right.
So.
Well, here.
Oh, also.
Yeah.
I like your, if you're going to, I don't know if you're going to keep it in, but BGU would be a fantastic.
Yeah.
Acronym for the kind of, the Dollars cinematic universe.
Yeah. I mean, I thought of it.
We're in the BGU.
Yeah. I thought it really when I needed to say it was for the ranking episode, but I didn't think of it then because you can't really like, even though two of these movies, the first one and the second one, refer specifically to dollars, not all of them do. Yeah. So you can't exactly call them a dollars edition for the ranking. It's more of a, you know, it's a split personality group of sequels. Title-wise.
Well, we had that problem with when we did Desperado and Once Upon a Time in America.
Yeah, right. Mexico.
Called the El Mariachi. Yeah.
Once Upon a Time in Mexico.
It was the Mexico trilogy, but it could also be the El Mariachi trilogy.
Yeah.
Or the Desperado trilogy. You got three options there. But I like the idea because if you think about the BGU, then you could put Once Upon a Time in the West there. You could put Fistful of Dynamite as well. So it doesn't have to just be the man. I guess you call it the Man with No Name trilogy.
Yeah, that's true.
That is
the No Name trilogy.
The trilogy with no name. The only complication there is Clint Eastwood played that character about 20 times more.
Yeah,
in other film series. So. I mean, it's the Outlaw Josie Wales, Unforgiven, Pale Rider.
People are like, did he have a name in Pale Rider? Never mind. He was the guy with no name.
he was the man with no copyright. Yes.
Well, we're talking for a few dollars more.
We are.
I'm officially going to call it a 1967 film.
Mm-hmm.
We talked about this in the ranking episode. So they came out in January. This comes out in May. And then The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly comes out in December. Now.
Oh, my God. What a year.
Like, all in 1 year.
And as well, when you think that, like, in 1968, America's going to fall apart.
Yeah.
The fact that, 1967 is already the calm before the storm. The last time there was domestic peace in America, and you could go and watch new releases of all the Dollars movies month after month.
Yeah,
it was a golden age.
By the time one's leaving theaters, you get to go see the next one.
I mean, it's like that's almost as good as when they re-released all the Apes movies.
Yeah,
into theaters, almost.
Well, we got to talk the revisionist history of Rotten Tomatoes, because it has a score on Rotten Tomatoes of 92%, which you think would make sense. But I know for a fact when this movie first came out, it wasn't terribly well reviewed.
No.
And none of these movies, I think, were at first. But now they're looked at as the classics that they are. And so you have... With the advent of Rotten Tomatoes, you have this sort of revisionist history.
But that's interesting, because I think if you're expecting a certain kind of Western, you don't get it in either of these movies.
Mm-hmm.
For different reasons.
Yeah, right.
I'm sure, because just said the source material is definitely the Hollywood Western, but in terms of the style, they play in the sandpit of Hollywood Western cliches.
Yeah,
but they don't deliver on the genre pleasures of the Western in the way people would have been expecting them to. And if they do it in a really kind of oblique way that subverts your expectations of how things are going to play out. And I think with Westerns, that's definitely a genre where people are very conservative in terms of what they expect, and the conventions are pretty fixed.
Yeah. So that was one of my questions for you coming into this, because I don't think I'm as well versed in this particular series. I certainly haven't seen the movies as often as you have. I'd seen them, but not like kind of grown up with them in the way that you seem to have. And so I didn't know about their standing. This is probably better for our last episode, but I was curious what you thought about, is this a reinvention of the Western cinema that Sergio Leone is giving us at this time?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
The way it's presented? That would be my understanding of what I think is going on, but I didn't know for sure.
Well, you've got the sort of the new Hollywood, which is, equally influenced by what came out of Hollywood's machine in the past and what's coming out of European cinema now.
Yeah.
And again, here, you've got this is a great kind of laboratory for all of those different film movements, because it's it's made in Europe.
Yeah.
But sort of referencing American cinema, but part of European cinema.
Well, that was what I found. That's watching these movies sort of for our purposes. What I found so interesting about watching them is sort of seeing classic Western tropes.
Yes.
Meaning a shot from behind of the right side of a person's body with the hand next to the holster. Classic Western kind of, images.
Yeah.
But mixed in with the new things that Sergio Leone's doing that I find, endlessly fascinating.
Yeah. And there's again, like the Tarantino, the sort of proto-Tarantino of it all, the ability to do what we would think now about as postmodern film quotation and referencing.
Mm-hmm.
Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. I can't remember if there are any in it for a few dollars more. Good, the Bad, and the Ugly pulls whole scenes from older Hollywood movies. Actually, there's the opening of this movie is modeled on High Noon, as is the opening of Once Upon a Time in the West. So it goes beyond just kind of genre. It's also quotation of individual movies, which is a very kind of advanced version of genre reproduction.
Yeah. Well, we've talked about him, but directed by Sergio Leone. When I think of Sergio, in my mind's eye, I think of a person that have just directed hundreds of movies.
No.
9.
Yeah, it's weird, isn't it? Yeah.
Isn't that weird?
Well, that shows, I think he was a perfectionist, and
yeah,
he thought on an epic scale that most, the realities of film production couldn't live up to.
Right.
So it took him years, sometimes decades, to get movies off the ground because of the way he conceived them, and I think very, very, very selective about the movies that he wanted to make as well.
It would seem so. I mean, I don't know if you've seen The Colossus of Rhodes or Sodom and Gomorrah.
No, but there's the myth of Sodom and Gomorrah informs this movie that we're about to talk about.
Okay. Well, then you have the Dollars trilogy, and we've already kind of talked about Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America. But the one that stuck out to me was Duck, You Sucker. And I was like, I want to see that fucking movie.
Yeah, I doubt that's his title. I bet that's how the Americans made sense of it. Yeah. No, I think, there's auteurs who are significant because of the volume and range of their movies, and then there's the director who only has a handful of, he's like a Italian Terrence Malick almost.
Yeah, right.
Whole decades can go by without him making a movie, but he'll keep coming back and doing something that will knock everyone's socks off.
Right.
But to me, this is his artistic peak.
Oh, interesting.
Precisely because these two movies, I think.
Okay.
These two movies.
Considering your ranking, I thought you meant this movie.
Sorry.
I started to get very interested in what you were about to say. Now I'm gonna not listen. No, go ahead.
Okay, fair enough. Let's not listen. No, I think this is where the idea of him as an artist and an entertainer kind of overlapped and created a perfect fusion. I think. The Once Upon a Time in the West, Once Upon a Time in America, sometimes kind of forget themselves as entertainment. Mm-hmm. So to me, that is less so.
Okay.
I love both of those movies, but I don't think they represent the best of his work. I think what he did here,
yeah, right,
is maybe because this is the Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America. They're not safe films, but they're big epic movies that can be found in mainstream cinema, mainstream prestige cinema.
Mm.
These are kind of they're bastardizations of good westerns.
Mm-hmm.
The reason that they're good is that they're bad sometimes. And this is the thing you mentioned. It seems a little bit indulgent. I think this is the Venn diagram of just indulgent enough to make you warm to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we should have had this conversation in the last episode.
Yeah.
But I want to say for both these movies, equally, there's a handful of movies out there that can make you feel cool by association just watching them.
Yeah, right.
And these two movies will always do that. There's a scene coming up at the beginning of this movie which, makes me feel so cool just being in its presence.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting.
It makes me want to say, "You're so cool, you're so cool, you're so cool," and write it down to a one-eyed Christian Slater on a beach.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's funny you say that because I mentioned the indulgence in the next film. It's funny. It's weird to talk about it because I do feel like there's indulgences in both these movies, but they're never bothering me.
Well, they've got a handle on how to do excess and camp and the absurd in a way that most movies don't have and most westerns don't have outside of there are times when it almost reaches a Python-esque level of absurdism.
Yeah, I mean, we've already kind of talked about that train moment.
Yeah, right, exactly.
That feels very Python.
And I don't know enough about Commedia dell'arte to sort of to know this for sure, but I think certainly in this movie, a lot of the background characters are based on Commedia dell'arte types.
Mm-hmm.
When we, the hotelier and his wife. I don't know if I'm thinking of something specifically, but I swear those are like two of the types of Commedia dell'arte that keep recurring. That you have to have in every Commedia dell'arte project. So.
All right. Well, before we get too far down the road, this movie had.
You don't want to go into a long tangent about classic Italian
theater?
Late. What's wrong with you?
This movie had a budget of $600,000. To the best of my knowledge, these are the numbers.
Wow.
It was hard to find an opening weekend, but I think I found an opening weekend of $5.5 million. And then in the USA and the world, they both gathered $15 million.
Yeah, the problem is that because the numbers are so hard to find, you could be talking about the right amount of dollars, or you could be talking about a few dollars more.
How dare you?
That was a long journey, but it was I think it was just about worth it.
Oh, you do you?
It was the kind of journey, it takes longer than you wanted to, but when you get there, you're sort of like, no, I'm still glad I made the journey.
Plus, it's interesting about the money corner for these movies is that's what they're counting in America, which is, a couple of years after these movies are a couple of years old by the time they even get to us.
And it's also the question of, and again, I don't know enough about this, but I assume these are not being watched as art house movies. These are being watched as exploitation movies.
Oh, I don't know. That's interesting.
Because that would also determine what people think of them. I mean, potentially it could be both, right? Like you could sell them kind of either way.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be satisfying, I think.
Right.
But they ain't no middle of the road westerns.
No, yeah.
There's no, you couldn't retrofit Randolph Scott into any of these movies. Randolph Scott.
Well, it's nice to open up and see a actual lion.
Oh, you got an actual lion in yours?
Yeah, for the MGM logo.
I don't know if I got that on mine. But
you must have.
Okay, well, I must have missed
it. How dare you not notice?
Maybe I was reserving my notes because I knew I'd be ready.
But I thought we both would say something about the matte painting beauty of this opening shot. Plus, I wrote down it's the coldest of all cold opens.
Well, I mean, I'm also interested in the screen that begins the movie before the opening shot, because there's a kind of, I don't know if you noticed, there's a dissolving light spot on a red canvas before we fade to the desert.
Mm-hmm.
And it's kind of like, to me, and this is where I started to think about, what's going on in modern art around this movie. That's like a modern art representation of the scene.
Oh, right.
That then kind of dissolves into the live action version of it. So it's establishing the idea of the movie as a kind of a moving painting, but also, the kind of low art of popular cinema and the high art of painting kind of moving in and out of each other. And then, I mean, it's so this opening is so experimental when you break it down. Like we begin with a static establishing shot with an audio of someone whistling.
Right.
Behind your ear.
Behind yeah, right. It's the
behind the camera.
It feels like the person holding the gun.
Camera. Right. And the image is entirely independent of that.
Yeah.
And so it's like you don't see both sound and image together, and you see the image of one part of the shot and the sound of the other part. I mean, that's something you expect from an experimental movie.
You know what?
That's like
also
playing with film form right out of the gate.
It also kind of hooked me into, well, that I don't know enough about music to tell you the title of this song. But I started thinking about that Johnny Cash song when he's, the character of the song is saying he's training the person with the gun, and then it accidentally went off. It hung my head.
Oh, don't take your guns to town. Don't take your guns to town, boy. Leave your guns at home. No?
I don't think so. The one where he says, "And I hung my head. I hung my head."
Well, you got the title right there. It's "I Hung My Head." And...
Well, that's what I just said, and then you said no. It's this other song.
Oh well, because you said you didn't know the title, but you. Just
I did, but then right before you started talking about the other song, I said,
"Do you know who wrote that song?"
No, clearly not. What are you talking about? What a stupid question.
Well, yeah, it is a stupid question to ask you, but on the other hand, it is someone you would have heard of and you would know.
Okay.
It's not like Conway Twitty or something like that. It's Sting wrote it.
Oh wow.
Written by Sting. It was recorded on one of the Rick Rubin America albums, and most of those were kind of songs.
I know who Rick Rubin is.
Yeah. Who else did he famously produce apart from Johnny Cash?
Everyone?
Step too far? Okay. That's it. I found the limits of your knowledge. Metallica, I believe, right?
Oh, I was going to say Tom Petty.
Well,
I think I remember him telling a story about Mary Jane's Addiction that Tom Petty was like...
Jane's Addiction.
Huh?
Oh, Mary Jane's Addiction. You're confusing Jesus and Mary Jane and Jane's Addiction. It's just Jane's Addiction. They're two different bands.
Isn't that the name of the song? It's just called
Mary Jane's Addiction.
We're going down a bad road here.
The Tom Petty song.
Yeah.
Last Chance of Mary Jane.
Yes.
Is that the one you're thinking of? Yes. Okay. I thought you were confusing the band Jane's Addiction with Jesus and Mary.
No,
which doesn't make sense because I doubt you've heard of either. Sorry.
Anyway, he was trying to get him to listen to one song, but fucking around with that song on the backside. He goes, and Rubin had said, go back to that other thing. What was that other thing? He goes, that's the song. That's the one that's your hit song. Do that one. Anyway.
Yeah, he also he did a Neil Diamond revival album as well after Johnny Cash died and he couldn't make money off any of his recordings anymore.
For some reason, the way you said it, I thought you were going to say Neil deGrasse and then go into time. I was like, what fucking album did he do?
It's just lectures.
How much do I not know?
Music. Yeah.
All right.
How did we get there?
I don't know. We went from the painting to the
well, I mean,
canvas.
Just it's experimental.
Yeah.
And then it's kind of half revealed. Well, it's revealed as a sniper's view.
Mm-hmm.
And then, we have this arch audio-visual representation of violence, and it's literally turning violence into art, which is the way violence exists in these movies as art, as film technique. It's never. I don't think anyone could watch these movies and complain that the violence is
gratuitous or
anything to do with real world violence.
Yeah, right.
It's so abstracted. It's completely about form and style, and I think that's what Tarantino's aiming for, and why he gets really prickly when people ask him about the links between violence in movies and the real world, because as far as he sees it in the Sergio Leone way, which is there's no link because you look at these movies and you can't see the connection between the act and the way it's represented. So and it's also and just to make it even more experimental, not that it needs to be seconds into the movie, but it's also first person cinema, which is the kind of the white whale of all great film directors. Every great film director has wanted to do a movie done entirely in first person. Orson Welles wanted to do a version of Heart of Darkness that way. So Leone thinks like the great artists of cinema.
Right, but it's one of those things where, do it right and you have this, and then do it otherwise, and you have Hardcore Henry, and it's just a video game.
Sure. Well, I mean, there's even precedents. There's even some not so good versions of it in the 1940s. Like, I don't know if you've ever seen Lady in the Lake. It's an adaptation of a Raymond Chandler Philip Marlowe novel, and it's done all first person. So the only time you see the actor playing Philip Marlowe is when he looks in the mirror.
Yeah, but they do that,
and it doesn't really work.
Yeah, it's funny because they do that in last year's Best Picture nominee Nickel Boys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and it's funny. People now would say it's experimental, even though they say don't know the history that you're talking about right now, or this kind of thing, but that as though it's never been done before.
What they mean is it doesn't work.
That's the thing, though, is as I watched Nickel Boys, I kept thinking, this is interesting. They are doing something you don't see very often, but I'm not very interested in it.
Yeah. It's hard. Yeah, and it's perfect for this self-contained cold open.
Right.
Which, is, I guess, if you count the opening screen, it's like more of a lukewarm open, but it is
pretty cold, though.
In media. Yeah,
no dialogue.
Pretty in media
you just have the whistling.
Yeah.
You have the smoky credits. The smoky animated credits that I dig so much.
And this is our first kind of big distinction between the movies, because the next movie doesn't have a cold open. It goes straight into the title.
Right.
So they're not even comparable on that level.
Yeah.
Yeah, and this is, I wrote, almost Pink Panther-esque titles.
Yeah.
So you get this very arty cold open followed by what look like kind of cartoon comic book graphics, which again is that intermingling of high art and low art, and different sort of different cultural categories of art playing with each other.
Did you notice that one of the credits for the story said scenario by? And my note was, that sounds like a credit for you and me. Like we did one of our pitches and somebody wrote, well, we'll give them a scenario credit.
That kind of seems to be how, not to drag this all back to Superman, which we do have.
You have no problem doing that.
We never have a problem doing that. But I'm pretty sure that's pretty much what Mario Puzo did for Superman. Like, he wrote a treatment and then got named as one of the screenwriters.
Okay.
So, yeah, and the I'm glad that I gotta say, you may have done the only credit check.
I forgot to say in our ranking episode. Good luck, sir, on your credit checks.
I think you've already stolen my thunder there. I think that might be the only credit check for this episode. And this is where you start, because it is so striking. You have to start thinking about the music, and it's not as iconic as Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, but it may well be as good.
But it's still fucking great.
The fundamental elements of what makes the Morricone score work in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly works here as well. It's this kind of call and response structure that he has. That it's not simply that the musical elements are kind of overlapping and building the way they do in a normal piece of music. There's a sense of like one part of the soundtrack is calling to the other and the other is responding back to it. I mean, sometimes literally with the but on more subtle levels too, and it's doing it here as well. I mean, you can break up the bow that's like two pieces of the orchestra talking to each other. So and it's a I listened before we came on to the Fistful of Dollars score, and it's a step up from that as well. So if we're testing Tarantino's theory of these movies getting progressively better, we're starting with the music. It's true so far.
All right. Well, my next note is we got Mr. Van Cleef reading his Bible on the train, and I like this guy talking next to him.
Well, I mean, yeah, and I guess this applies to both movies, but I'll mention it here. Like the director's credit is shot away.
Oh yeah.
At the end of the title sequence in both movies. This one's
Guns, right?
Gun. Yeah, and then the next one is a canon. So, that is definitely a case of upping the ante. But it's also, he's identifying, Leone's identifying himself with the style of movies that he's making. Like, he's sort of a self-styled violence director.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and, well, first of all, as well, right before we get to Lee Van Cleef reading the Bible, opening text.
Yeah.
On the screen, right? About bounty hunters.
Yeah.
Which again, I think this is probably the key to the argument that this is a mythic version of the West, because there's no historical information here. It reads like a passage from the Bible, which we're about to see a character read. So it could almost have come out of the Bible he was reading. So it's kind of like it's like impenetrable. It's like a real history cannot intrude on this version of the West that we're creating here. Yeah, and the other thing that both, I guess, right here, these may be the only structural similarities between the two movies. At the beginning of both this and The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, the title music fades out, and then you get a diegetic version of one of the sounds of the soundtrack that you've just heard.
Hmm.
So in the next, well, we'll talk about the next movie in the next movie, but here, one of the pieces of music you hear recurs as diegetic sound because the train wheels sound like that part of the song, and they do that in both movies. So they go between non-diegetic and diegetic sound and music and soundscape, and they kind of play
off of each other, right?
Yeah. Beautifully done. Yeah, Bible reading bounty hunter, which I don't know, especially when you make your movie in Catholic countries, kind of quite countercultural.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it's also something that doesn't seem to come back.
Well, thematically it does. But
thematically, yes, but
as a plot point, yeah. I think that's what it's there to do. It's like this movie is a story in the Bible that he's reading.
Right.
I think that's the idea. It not as on the nose as the rostrum camera shot of the book opening, but
yes,
it's kind of in that wheelhouse.
Sure.
Yeah, and also, I mean, this is the first Hollywood movie reference, because immediately I'm put in mind of Night of the Hunter.
Oh yeah,
they're using the idea of Robert Mitchum as the preacher to kind of characterize Lee Van Cleef. Also,
I watched that movie a couple of years ago. Does he arrive to town on a train?
No.
Okay.
But just the criminal Bible.
No, yeah. But
association immediately put me in mind of Night of the Hunter.
Interesting.
And then, but the Bible over the face also helps with the dubbing as well.
Yeah, true.
And this is, it's the most parodied aspect of these films, but for my money, you get used to it so quickly.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it in the ranking episode, where this is something that might bump you in a movie you saw today.
Yeah.
Where you're thinking, why can't they get that right? But I mean, with these movies, you have the underlying fact that they were made in another country.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But it's just one of those things where it's like, it doesn't bother you for a single second.
No, not at all. And I think it's immediately noticeable how precise and technically apt every camera move and camera placement is when they're going into the journey into the station. It's such a simple set of shots, but if you watch those shots in sequence, literally nothing is out of place.
No, yeah. The pulling of the cord, straight to the conductor's whatever it is, the booth. Yeah. But you're going to see the wheels coming to a stop. You're going to see the confused looks. And then all of a sudden, what I love too is that door comes down and out comes Van Cleef just walking with that fucking horse.
Well, this is our first sort of semi-absurdist moment in the movie as well. The kind of sense of the absurd of him walking a horse off a train. There are these, and they get more and more as these movies go on, these bold moments of heightened humor that kind of pop out of the movie. And this is the sort of first one. And
you know what's great about it too is because there's the ramp. There's the ramp to get the horse off. It's as though he knew exactly how long it would take for the train to get to that spot so he can have the ramp for his horse.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
And it establishes Leone's kind of USP, which is you tell the story through people's eyes.
Uh-huh.
And, you know, Lee Van Cleef's eyes are probably the pair of the most striking eyes you'll see on any film actor.
Sure.
So much so that he's called Angel Eyes in the next movie. But this is our canvas for telling the story. Essentially, is the eye movement.
Mm-hmm.
More so than in body movement. It's eye movement that tells the story.
Right.
In fact, it's almost eye movement in lieu of body movement.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about what a movie today would do with this scenario, this character would walk back up to the conductor when he starts kind of protesting against stopping the train just for himself.
Yeah.
And I don't even know, take a knife out, put it to his throat, say, "Are you sure?" Whatever kind of menacing thing they could do to let you know you're dealing with a bad person. And Leone just has Van Cleef look at the guy, and you see his blood run cold, and you see him say, "You know what? I'm going to cut my losses and just get back on this fucking train and go away and let him go about his business."
We should do a spin-off podcast, which is do this scene badly. Do this scene, but badly. But, arriving at the train station the way he does, and then he goes into a saloon and they stop playing the organ as soon as he walks through the door. Right. And this is where you realize that we're playing in the sandpit of Western movie cliches.
Yeah, right.
Here. That's the language that we're kind of speaking in.
But it's a love language.
The movie. It is certainly it's a love language, and it's also a basis for subverting expectations as well. It establishes expectations that are then subverted. But again, the eyes are conducting the narrative here because, if you just pay attention to what they're saying,
mm-hmm.
you only get half the story, because he goes up to the saloon owner and says, "Where is he?" And says he doesn't know. But then his eyes,
I love that.
Look up.
Yeah.
But that's an example of literally, the eyes are doing all the narrative heavy lifting here.
Sure.
And again, the idea of like the violence that we see when he knocks on the door and then those gunshots come through.
Yeah.
It's totally performative. It's extremely choreographed. There's no blood. There's no graphic representation of violence. It is, it's almost violence as a kind of dance. Like a ballet.
Right. And I like, there was something for me anyway at play about, because once the shots come through the door, he's willing to once again stand in front of the door.
Yeah.
Because in his mind, he knows that the guy's already out the window. He knows that he's scared and running, as opposed to standing his ground, to put it in today's terms. But just that slow turn of the doorknob and walking in, and that wry smile when he sees that the guy's running. Plus the woman in the bathtub with the soapy tits.
Well, this is and of course you noticed. But that's a really, aside from the the somewhat exploitative use of female bodies, which won't be the last time we see that in a Sergio Leone movie, but it does a good job of establishing the sort of persona of Lee Van Cleef. Like he's equal parts Hollywood heavy and handsome leading man.
Because she's interested. You could tell.
Well, yeah, she does. And again, I think this is a reference to North by Northwest, when, Cary Grant's escaping from the hospital.
Oh, okay.
And he goes through the patient's room, and the woman's initially scared, and then he says, "No, stay," and he goes like that. And I think it's because he's so suave in how he handles that situation. He just kind of tips his hat and goes, "Pardon me, ma'am," and then leaves. And again, this sort of establishes a base of the character that is completely inverted by the time you get to Angel Eyes, because one of the first things we see Angel Eyes do is like fucking throw in a woman, like slapping her silly.
Yeah.
And it's just
like... After killing her child.
These can't be the same men. Look how he handles the situation. Right. Look how Angel Eyes handles the situation. But there's that duality there that kind of means he can be both the heavy and the leading man. And so he's the perfect choice here. Mm-hmm. And, you know, you only get this in pockets in the next movie when he's kind of playing a part. But here, he's so kind of suave and debonair looking as well.
Sure.
With his, you know, the coat
over the shoulders, the pipe, yeah.
Yeah.
But there was also something at play at the end of this scene that kind of speaks to what I was talking about in terms of Leone's sort of reinvention. Because I didn't have a good handle on the idea of... I thought it was so interesting the way these two movies handle weapons.
Yes.
And it felt like that.
Very technical.
Yeah, really technical with the, you know, kind of the butt that you could lay against your shoulder for a handgun, which I'd never seen in any Western before or since myself, that I found endlessly fascinating.
I never thought about that before, but you're so right. Yeah, I mean, you see the inside of guns more than you see the outside in these movies.
Yeah, right.
You see the constituent parts of the gun and how it fits together.
I mean, it's not till the next film.
It's more like a war movie in that sense. Like, that's something that you get in war movies, but not necessarily in Westerns.
Yeah. I want to save it, but I'll just say now, I could watch Eli Wallach put together a gun for like 4 straight hours.
Yeah, you may get some pushback if you try and argue that that's one of the more indulgent sequences in the movie.
No, I won't. I won't for a second. I'm fine with it.
That may be one of the longest scenes in the movie, but it's entirely justified as far as I'm concerned.
You want to hear something funny?
Sequence... Yeah.
Eli Wallach doesn't know anything about guns, and that entire scene was improvised.
Oh, yeah.
The only thing he was shown was how to take them apart. And he did all of that just on his own.
That's amazing. You were so lucky in that sense he decided not to bring the dead chicken this time.
Yeah, right.
That would have been too much. Well, the shooting of his mark, who was I think called Calloway, and it's just this ballet of editing and camera movement. It's like pure film style. This is one of the moments that makes me feel really cool when I watch it.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's one of the sequences. There's nothing really to say about it because it's perfect. But you know, when you see editing and camera movement paired together so impeccably like that,
yeah,
and that's it. I mean, and again, that's what's telling the story. That's like
right.
It's using. It's pure cinema because it's using film style to tell the story, not dialogue.
Right.
Not acting,
but we've said
elements of film.
Yeah, we've said this before in terms of performances from actors, but the filming of this entire scene, it feels very effortful, but it looks effortless.
Yes, absolutely. Well, speaking of effortless, we have a moment where Clint Eastwood's character is. Possibly from the last movie is reintroduced.
Yeah.
And we're told, the first thing we're told about the man with no name is his name, which is Monko.
Yeah.
So, in fact, really, instead of the man with no name, he should be called His Name is Monko.
His name is...
Monko!
That's great.
Yeah.
Well, that's the funny thing that struck me as I was watching this film, because I had kind of forgotten about this. It'd been so long since I seen them. I still thought of him as the man with no name, and then you know, to see the name Joe come up so easily in the first movie, and then to watch this movie, I'm like, Manco, like what the fuck is going on here? This guy's got nothing but names.
He's the man with nothing but names. We all remember the man with nothing but names.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's the classic trivia question that I remember from my youth as well. It was the classic pub trivia question.
Sure.
What is the name of the man? You know, what is the?
What are the 3 names of the man with no name?
We get the man with no name.
But there's also a part because when we're reintroduced to him, I mean, for one, he's got the poncho, he's got his hat. It's like
that's important. Right. So they're reintroducing him as a legacy character, certainly.
Yeah.
Because of how he's dressed.
It's like Axel Foley with his Axel Foley costume.
Yeah, but he's given a different name.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, you've seen it more recently than I have. I don't know if I don't know if it's a stereotype that Clint Eastwood plays every role the same, but it did strike me that he might be playing this slightly differently.
I think so too, yeah.
Maybe in all of these movies he's playing the role slightly differently.
I agree with that.
But yeah, they're definitely using the character iconography to reintroduce Clint.
But and then there's this part because
that's as much as we know.
Yeah, because he's also he plays the one round of cards with the guy he's tracking, and then he starts smacking him around, but he's smacking him around with one hand. Because
like martial arts.
Well, no, I think he received an injury, like he got shot or something in the first movie.
Oh.
And so that's another connective tissue to make you think this is the same guy, right?
Oh, okay, yeah. Well, also a connection to Eastern cinema.
True, yeah.
Because it's hand-to-hand combat rather than gunplay.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, this is about the time that we start to intermix martial arts into Western cinema. Like
yeah,
Day at Black Rock is 1965, is the first time that happened, and then by the mid-70s, it's kind of commonplace in Western cinema. So, but again, more biblical imagery because when they're playing cards, the hand is one of them has his three kings. And the place they're in is represented as a modern day Sodom and Gomorrah,
right?
As well. So it's like it might be kind of it might be kind of countercultural in how it's approaching assumptions about religion, but this is definitely a movie made by a person with a Catholic school education. That he can just pull these myths and images out to tell his story in the way that he does. Oh, and then we get one of the first moments of sound and image synchronicity with when he spins his gun to the sound.
Yeah.
And this was so it's
is that after killing the three guys?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It goes and he rolls the gun back, spins it back into
the holster. Yeah.
And it's interesting. At that conference I mentioned in the previous episode, another one of the papers was about how when Sergio Leone combines sound and images, it's more than just synchronizing the two. It kind of goes beyond that into what this guy was arguing with synesthesia. Like, actually, you don't know what is, like, the integrity of the sound and the image kind of collapse in on each other, and you see the sound and you hear them, you see the sound and you hear the image, that kind of thing. And I mean, that's certainly the example he uses, The End of the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, where I think it's very demonstrable.
Right.
But I think here and there, it's almost like sound and image become one.
Yeah.
And more than that, they kind of fold in on each other and sort of become indistinguishable.
Yes. Yeah.
To the point where you're not sure if you've heard
if you did it, if you heard it, right?
Yeah.
But it also, at least in this moment, it feels really playful too.
Yeah, I mean, the other side of it, this is the entertainment side of it. It's like a commercial jingle.
Yeah, right.
You can see a commercial that ends with or
like John Mahoney at fucking Cheers.
By Menem. Costanza. But then actually, this I was like, I don't know if this movie quotes from Hollywood, old Hollywood movies, and I found about 10 examples so far, but not quite throwing down the tin star from High Noon, but Clint takes it off.
Takes the tin
star off and throws. So it's
just gives it to a passerby outside. It says, "You need a new sheriff."
But it's like the iconography of the classic Hollywood Western, but reappropriated, and also it's interesting.
But it also kind of feels like the modern day detective, like, hand in your badge.
Yeah. And what Clint Eastwood will also reference at the end of Dirty Harry as well. So I wonder whether this is where he got the idea and he just lent into Don Siegel's ears, like, I did this movie in Spain, and You know, he did thing with a 10 star.
All right. Well, we've met our two, for lack of a better word, heroes. Why don't we take our first break?
Yeah.
And come on back.
Indeed.
All right. We'll do that and be right back, everyone. Listen to this great fucking music again.
I like to think I know something about beer, but nowadays even I get overwhelmed when confronted by the exhaustive selection of craft beers they have at bars, breweries, and even grocery stores. Back in the day you had one, maybe two craft beers to choose from, and if you were confused, you ordered a Guinness. But in beerstinations like San Diego, the craft beer options lately are in double, sometimes even triple digits. So what's a beer drinker to do? You need what I need, the Vegas Beer Guys. Your beer of choice should be a perfect blend of malt and hops. And so a live show about beer needs that same balance. And the Vegas Beer Guys matches beer expert Dan Aker with self-proclaimed beer novice Stephen J. Weiss. The results are eminently drinkable. They're on Facebook, they're on Instagram. They'll try new beers, they'll tell you about beer. Think of them as your beer Sherpas guiding you up a foamy-headed mountain to reach the peak of your pint. God, I need a beer.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here, figuring out the beauty behind For a Few Dollars More.
Well, it's self-evident, you know, and that's the great thing about it. You don't have to do too much digging. And just to, as we left, you mentioned, you know, that these are ostensibly our two heroes.
Yeah, right.
And I guess the fact that...
And they're bounty
Clint
killers.
Eastwood...
I like that they call them bounty killers in this movie.
But there's a duality there, isn't it? Because Mortimer is formerly a colonel.
Right.
So he has a moral authority there. He'll also gain moral authority through his actions later on in the movie. But Clint here as well is kind of the moral arbiter of the law. He's sort of the guy who's saying, you know, who can and can't be sheriff.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I think, I don't know if this speaks to what you're saying about why you prefer this movie, but you do have a clearer sense that these two are anti-heroes, but, you know, they're not, they're neither hero nor villain. And in the next movie, it's much more, it's black and white.
Yeah.
And Clint Eastwood is the shade of gray.
Yes. But that's what I think I reacted to so favorably on this viewing this time.
Yeah.
Was sort of, I hooked into what my feelings on my first watch, which was, you know, you watch Van Cleef come into the town and just sort of shoot and kill the guy the way he does. And you think, are they telling me that this guy is the Terminator? Can't be stopped at any price, or you know, you can't dissuade him, you can't do anything. And then you meet Clint, and you think you're like you said, you think you're going to have a movie like the next movie where the characters are diametrically opposed as to who they are internally. But this movie is not quite as clear.
Definitely not.
And that I found endlessly interesting, watching these two play against each other, with each other, off of each other. Mm-hmm. I like that interplay so much in this movie. And that's part of what I was reacting to so favorably.
I like it too. I think that the Good, the Bad, and the Ugly does a great job of establishing what the characters are and then playing off the predictability of that. Mm. So you always know Tuco is gonna try to pull one over on you. Yeah. Regardless of how close or bonded you get, as soon as he can, he will pull one over on you. And I like that. I like those certainties, but I like here that that we're able to kind of play with the ideas of who these characters are in the context of this world a little more. It's very effective. And
yeah, absolutely. Now, the next thing I know, we've got El Indio needs to escape, and there is some interesting shit going on in here in this movie. Stuff that I had forgotten. When they go into his cell,
yes,
and his cellmate is there, I remember thinking to myself, I feel like he should let this guy go, but he's not gonna. Then, of course, that's what happens.
Well, it's the whole penetration of the jail sequence. I mean, again, I didn't write too much about it, except it's like a ballet. It's like watching a ballet.
Yeah.
The choreography of it, and this is a great example of, when you have this choreographed movement going on, it's okay to allow sequences to take their time.
Mm-hmm.
For all of this you need that for all of this to play out. It's kind of, it's the pace that it's going is very purposeful, because the pace is designed around the movement,
right,
and the sequence. So this isn't the kind of meandering I'm talking about in the movie. I think this scene justifiably takes its time.
Mm-hmm.
For what it is.
I also like what it chooses to show you and what it chooses not to show you. It shows you the kind of stark awfulness of killing his cellmate.
Sure.
But the hand through the door, not the door,
mm-hmm.
through the door within the door, the little to kill the commandant, the guy, the guy in charge of the jail, and then not just putting the gun through, but also pointing it down when he's on the ground. But you don't see any of that. You just see it from El Indio's point of view.
Yeah,
really interesting to me.
Yeah, there's a definite, from moment one in this movie, there's an interplay between what the audiences are permitted to see and what they're not.
Yeah,
and I think if you think about these as, you would come out of them and maybe even go into them thinking of them as violent movies, but you don't actually see a lot of violence. Most of it's off-screen, abstracted, or so distorted from what the act actually is. It basically doesn't happen in front of you.
Yeah.
And they keep doing that again and again. And and I also like going back to the Pink Panther-esque titles, that they they don't mind the occasional cartoonish exaggeration of reality.
Mm-hmm.
There's some Looney Tunes layered into here. The first one for me being the laughing wanted poster.
Yeah, right.
Because my first thought is, where did they get that photo?
Yeah.
But they go from him laughing to a photo of him laughing on a wanted poster, which doesn't sort of make any sense. Like, when did they take that photo, and why have they got one of him laughing? But I just thought that's such a great Batman 66 moment. That's and it plays to the pop side of pop art.
Mm-hmm.
I think a moment like that, which they can absolutely.
It's the soup can of this movie.
Format. Yeah, definitely. Or it's the the Mickey Mouse in the Roy Lichtenstein.
Yeah.
Thing. To use an example from my favorite artist of all time.
Oh.
Yeah, Roy Lichtenstein.
Well, we're going to stop right there and move on. I feel a heavy art tangent coming on. I'm taking my shovel and slamming the metal contraption to take you on to the next tracks, which...
Wait, this isn't the Everything sequel pop art? And this is where I think we get our first montage of eyes. Right? So it's like, it's not just that the eyes are telling the story, but like cutting between people's eyes is also telling the story.
Are you talking about when he kills the guy who turned him in?
Yeah. Uh-huh. So we get this kind of like this montage of eyes, which, is gonna come back again, but also it's sort of like
heavy in the last scene, not last scene, but the standoff and
right
GBU.
But it's like a kind of variation on reverse shot, but it's just the eyes.
Uh-huh.
It's like cutting back and forth between the two of them. And again, the idea of sound or music specific to an object as well, because this is where the stopwatch is introduced.
Yeah, right.
As the pocket watch. with the tingling of the bells, which is associated with that object. And again, I think this is another synesthesia moment where you hear, even when you hear that noise in the next movie, and it's not associated with a with the pocket watch, you still think about the pocket watch,
right.
Or you almost see a pocket watch. And I think that this is a, but it just shows that the soundtrack is playing on so many different levels. It's being your music is being used to represent diegetic sound as much as non-diegetic sound.
Yeah, but also represent death, because once it ends, you're done.
I don't know if this is what you were talking about when you were talking about how brilliantly thought out this movie is, but there's a wide shot, because basically El Indio goes to knock off the guy to take revenge on the guy who put him in jail and his family, who sold him out to be with his family. And there's a wide shot of the victim's home, and it looks like a Caravaggio painting. It's like the levels of detail in this home, in the color and the set design. I coined the phrase here, cinema plus, because it's not just cinema. It goes way beyond that, and it reminded me of like a scene from Fellini's Satyricon, which is this kind of scene that everyone talks about in terms of the movie as like the kind of the movie showing ancient Greece to be waiting for Christianity, basically, is the scene. It's where these a Roman senator and his family all sit down to dinner and all take poison and then all pass out and die. And there's a kind of peacefulness to it that people have associated with the idea of like a civilization wanton of Christianity. And I feel all the same things here. And it's just a very Italian scene, like the organ music.
Yeah.
It's kind of a very operatic sequence. There's a pulpit in there as well. I think they're in a church, because isn't there a pulpit in there?
Is there?
And they talk about religion a lot. Maybe that's a later scene.
But my note was that this is the first time where I start thinking to myself, Leone's like creating a new Western, something that I don't know had ever been seen before. This is when it started dawning on me that, like everything that we're seeing put together that I've seen so far makes it, something new entirely.
It's kind of synchronized. It's doing gunfights in synchronized time, right? Where you got a ticking clock, and then the sound and the editing and the idea of cinematic time are all combining. Well,
that was the thing, because the first thing I thought of was waiting for it to hit like high noon, like hit, the tick of a clock.
Yeah.
Except here you're waiting for the sound to end.
But that's the precedent, I think.
And yet it's still a watch. You know what I mean? Like.
Yeah. When Leone draws on the Hollywood Western, he draws on the best and most experimental elements of it, because High Noon is a film made in real time.
Mm-hmm.
So in a way, that's an even more experimental film than this, because it takes the movie takes the time that is shown in the movie to the minute, and he's kind of sort of using that as a basis for how he does gunfights,
right?
But he's taking the whole conceptual idea of High Noon and sort of translating it into set pieces.
Yeah.
So it's like that's another Hollywood, he's indebted to those movies and their inventiveness, but he's definitely taking it into a different direction. Something that you see in a lot of Sergio Leone films, and he gets more interested in as his movies go on, is his dissection of the idea of capitalism.
Mm-hmm.
Because when Clint arrives in that town, you've got the boys who swarm on him, and they represent the various hotels and businesses of the town.
Right.
And it's like Once Upon a Time in the West and especially Once Upon a Time in America are gonna go big on dissecting the kind of the intricacies of American capitalism, but it's kind of happening on a much smaller scale here.
Yeah, I love it too, because
the whole idea in the next, they basically next movie is a satire of inflation at one point when they, when they're artificially inflating the reward money.
Yeah.
But you get a glimpse of it here.
Well, and I like it too because the kid, what's the kid hold back that pisses off Clint?
I don't remember. Oh,
Doesn't he hold back some information? And Clint's like, "Listen here, motherfucker."
Yeah. It's about where Lee Van Cleef, his room is.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
What floor it's on, or something like that, or what number it is.
But it just the idea that everything's for sale, and yeah, you might have given me some money now, but now that I know it's worth more,
capitalism, right?
Capitalism, exactly. Yeah,
it's worth as much as anyone's willing to pay for it. But it's the economy, stupid.
And even within that. Like, this is the moment where Van Cleef is talking to the bank general manager guy about the security of the building itself.
Yeah.
But, well, not this building. He's actually, they'll end up talking about the building they end up going to, but the most secure building. But
and this is where I think we start to get those commedia dell'arte types. Like the bank clerk seems like one, the couple in the hotel seems like one. Especially because, you know, when she's lusting after Clint.
Yeah, I love her.
And to be frank, in the mid-'60s, who wouldn't?
I have several notes that say, I don't know that Clint thought of as a heartthrob at the time?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Oh, heartbreaker,
okay.
Sex symbol. For a lot, well into the 70s at least.
All right.
But man, I mean, and he looks good in this movie. In the next movie, like, I we'll talk about that separately. But I just say I would wear that shirt and coat now.
Would you like a damp towel?
Oh man, he's so handsome. But then you've got the thing where the guy, you know, she talks about how tall he is. Oh, he must be at least 5'5", and then that guy gets off his stool and he's fucking tiny. So, you know, there is this sort of like, you know, very theatrical kind of vaudeville-esque background.
Well, plus, that whole thing about him kicking the other guy out of the room.
It's great.
So
Which,
fucking
again,
funny.
You never see. You don't actually see it happen.
Yeah,
you just
exactly.
see him go up, and then the guy,
comes down, just scared out of his wits, looking like
it's like a Blake Edwards. That's the thing. Like again, a perfectly landed comic moment, and it's kind of like how Blake Edwards would have done it. I think you know that kind of.
We'll find you another room.
We'll
find no. I very much want to leave. I'll just go.
And this is, I think they use the as not just as him putting the gun in the holster, but literally as a kind of to borrow a phrase from Bill O'Reilly, play us out. just to kind of wrap up the scene. It just, as the scene is ending, it goes
right,
and then goes into the next scene, and it's like a jingle, right? Like it's basically being used as a punctuation mark.
Mm-hmm.
Almost like music is a form of dialogue. It's the final line of the scene.
Yeah.
So
I kept writing notes because I think coming up is Van Cleef talking with well, I don't know his real name because I kept going back and forth on Klaus Kinski. I kept writing his character name as was either Nosferatu or Fitzcarraldo. I just kept going back and forth.
I don't think we've talked more about my favorite art in more than in these episodes, but as we're starting to talk about Klaus Kinski, I mean, he plays the lead in one of my all-time favorite movies, definitely a top 5, which is Aguirre, Wrath of God.
Oh.
But I mean, Fitzcarraldo's not far behind that, but this is very early on in Kinski's career.
Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting because they know what they've got.
Yeah.
They definitely know what they've got because he's a hunchback.
Mm-hmm.
So they know that he can be molded into this gothic gargoyle sort of character.
Right.
Who, you know, doesn't really have a place within the West, but is kind of is more of a sort of gothic horror character.
Right, and it's like
a German expressionism.
Right,
overhang.
yeah, exactly. And it's so funny because it's not like he has lots and lots and lots to do in this movie.
No.
But you always know where he stands, and he's got a chip on his shoulder, and that chip is that hump.
The chip is the hump, and I think there's only so long that Klaus Kinski can play anybody before the strangeness starts to
seep in, or seep out,
because it's a fairly sort of inconspicuous entrance for him.
Yeah, right.
And they don't even make a big deal of the hump to start
with. No,
yeah.
And you wouldn't even know it's there at first, really.
But the as it does in all the movies, the performance kind of takes over, and and I think as well, talking about playing in the sandpit of Western cliche, but lighting the match on the neck, is like a variation of the various ways that matches are lit in westerns or gangster movies, on people's tin stars. I think in A Fistful of Dollars, doesn't Clint light it on his stubble?
I can't see. I'm starting to confuse them because I know he does the pant leg. Maybe that's even the next movie. I don't remember.
Yeah,
but he has the pant leg. I think he does do a face.
Yeah, I think he does his face. I remember that distinctly.
All right,
but lighting a match on the back of the neck is taking it to a whole nother level. So, and before that we get, this is where Kinski's introduced. We have the Bandit Conference.
Yeah, right.
Which is, and this is where I'm looking at the actors going, all of these guys return as different characters in the
all
next
of them.
movie.
But you know what I do like about this? Because even though he's a hunchback, you have a sense that he's kind of like Ike in Tombstone. That sense that he's
the village idiot.
Yeah, but there's a certain amount of danger associated with that kind of person.
Oh, sure.
And then what I really like, because they haven't come together yet, is all these people start, as El Indio and Van Cleef and Clint all start coming together, you start having this real sense of what I'm sure was a thing in the West of all people that were really good at what they did. But when death is on the line, only one can be the fastest and the best. Than anyone. And this movie sits in a place where all of those characters believe them to be that man in a way that really appeals to me and I find interesting.
Yeah, it's true. You do. You feel everyone's point of view.
Yeah.
You also get in this scene a parable from a pulpit, which is again
more Bible.
This is a biblical fable, and again, I don't have much to say about the bank heist. I mean, it's a great example of how Leone directs, because he stages set pieces theatrically, and then films them cinematically.
Mm-hmm.
So he lets the editing of shots tell the story, but the way when you look at that at the set at the bank and its surrounding areas, it has to be one set.
Yeah.
That he's doing shots within and editing shots throughout.
Sure.
So it's kind of a combination of like theatrical staging but cinematic execution, which is always a difficult balancing act, but one that he does extremely well. You get a version of it in the next film with the sort of the ongoing Civil War battle.
Yeah.
Which is used as background.
Yeah.
So this is less elaborate than that, but it's still pretty elaborate. I mean, that's a massive set to build.
Sure.
For the sake of what is a small sequence. Although that's the other thing about this movie. One of the ways in which they're developing the Western and changing it is by hybridizing it with other genres. So this is much more
heist
of a heist
film
movie than and the next movie is so much a war movie as well.
Right.
But I was kind of struck here because you do get heists in Westerns and bank robberies and things like that, but they're sort of more set pieces as opposed to kind of recurring
themes.
Well, like because they keep sort of having heist after heist after heist as the movie goes on. So it's interesting that they've gone in that direction. One of the great moments of this movie, and I think I would say generally of the use of point of view in cinema, is the double telescope.
Oh, I love it so much.
That's what I was aching to get to. It feels like it's been imitated to death, but probably you've never seen it before this. The idea of like you look through a telescope and someone's looking back at you through another telescope.
Yeah.
It's just fun. It's just fantastic, and the fact that it's these two characters who are like.
Well, that's what I love about it, because it also, it also speaks to what I was just saying before about the kind of top dog nature of the character, because Van Cleef has never, I think, before in his life, thought of himself as somebody who could be spied on successfully.
Yeah.
And then to see it happening through your own telescope, you know, and you get to see the look on his face and the wry smile that Clint has from kind of getting over on him. I love all of it so much.
It's revolutionary film editing as well, because, you know, Hollywood film was based on the principle of shot, reverse shot.
Yeah.
But it's not point of view, reverse point of view.
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's sort of like this is sort of, I don't know, it feels kind of, and it feels like it comes from from a place of comedy.
Yeah, it does,
right?
yeah.
It's sort of like, you can imagine a Python sketch like this, right? Couldn't you? Where there's two people who are spying on each other with telescopes. In fact, isn't there like a Frasier episode where this happens, where Martin's they're looking through the telescope at a lady in another apartment, and
I don't remember.
She's looking at him.
I do vaguely remember that. One of my favorite bits, I always think of that movie Volunteers with Tom Hanks, when I think it might be John Candy who's looking through binoculars, and then is it the Chinese government, like the soldiers? There's like,
I've never seen Volunteers.
So funny. There's like 5 guys looking through binoculars, and then you see the view of 5 sets of binoculars.
That's excellent.
That's great.
Well, my next note is Demented Train Elder. This guy. And again, I think
I called him the Prophet.
Well, he is. Yeah,
he is a prophet. I mean, right?
That's his official name.
Yeah.
I like to think of him as Demented Train Elder.
But this is where my train joke comes in, and I just fucking love it.
It's really funny. It's really funny, and it's also satirical as well. I mean, this is what Leone will do on a bigger scale with his representation of the railroad in Once Upon a Time in the West. Is this idea of like the people of the West become subject to the capitalism of the railroad. Yeah. So this guy's, you know, this guy, a train's going to go right past his house because capitalism dictates it has to.
It must.
Yeah, and this guy either moves out of the way.
But what I like too about it is, one, Clint's spot-on comedic reaction to it.
Isn't it great?
It's fucking amazing. Yeah. But I also love that the old coot doesn't even notice.
Yep. Yep, he's in his these are the kinds of characters that I think Mel Brooks was thinking about when he came up with the authentic frontier gibberish character in Blazing Saddles. But yeah, and it's just expert. That's the thing as well, like landing visual and verbal comedy, in the same scene.
Yeah,
with a 1-2 punch. Like we have the moment where the steam is kind of penetrating every gap in the home, and then, you know, after a perfectly timed pause, he says, "You said no." So great.
Well, for me in my notes, like next I have, like this is one of my favorite things in the movie, the way that Clint and Van Cleef square off against each other.
Their wordless meeting. I mean,
everything about it.
That you
I just
show,
eat it like it's candy.
If you were in film school and someone had a dialogue heavy scene, I would just show them this and go, okay, what have we learned from this scene about these two characters?
Yeah.
And they'll tell, you know, and there'll be 1,000 things. You'll put them up on the whiteboard, and they'll be like, how many words were spoken in this scene?
Right.
Just put a big 0. Yeah. It's just crazy what you can convey without
the scuffing of the shoes.
Yeah.
Fucking amazing.
And in the middle of this, I mean, you know, we find out, I think, right before this, the kind of the beginnings of Mortimer's backstory. Like, we learn he's an officer turned bounty killer,
mm-hmm.
which is weird because he's the
inverse
in the next movie.
Yeah.
He starts out as a bounty hunter and becomes a soldier. But in the middle of it all, you've got this you've got this Asian porter. And like, he's a comedically pitched character, which is
man, when he finally goes inside, I laughed so hard.
Which is, like, there's an argument to say that he's sort of, he's too comedically pitched, but I don't think you saw a lot of Asian people in westerns at the time.
At the time, right.
And we know they were a huge part of the story of the West. So the fact that they're even thinking about that, I think, shows that, like, yeah, maybe he is in that sort of, African-American porter in the 1940s movie mold a little bit, but the fact that they're willing to put that representation on screen shows that they're kind of thinking a little bit differently about how they see the West. Even if it is this mythic place, there's still some historical realities within it.
Yeah.
Here and there.
Well, one thing, because this is another moment where you feel like you could make the argument that it's indulgent, but to me, it justifies itself completely. And I still remember the first...
Which part? What, the meeting between them?
Well, like the shooting of the hat, and that Clint keeps doing it, and he has to keep walking to the hat, and then he just shoots it again, and then it goes... I mean, everything about it is so fucking great. And I still remember, because I was still like... The first time I saw this movie, I remember, like, really still trying to get my hooks into Van Cleef and who he was. And I really thought, in the moment, I remember thinking, he's just slowly walking to pick up his hat because he knows Clint will shoot it again. And he's trying to get him to run out of bullets. And then he's going to shoot that motherfucker. But I didn't know at the time that they were going to play the same game, that they kind of, that they had almost an automatic respect for each other on the level of who they are and what they can do.
Sure.
And the fact that he just shoots off his hat, and then he does the same thing, but the hat's always in the air, as if to show off a little bit more. All of it is fucking... Like, everything about it is top to bottom fantastic.
It's like that scene in Goodfellas when they're in prison and they try and tell Martin Scorsese's dad to put less meat in the sauce, and they're saying, you don't need so many kinds of meat, you can take out the pork. He's like, no, that's the flavor.
That's the flavor.
That's what I think about this scene. All the business with the hats is the flavor.
3 small onions. That's all I got in there. 3 small onions.
3 onions. And also the sound effect of the hat drop into the ground is like it's that little bit of Looney Tunes layered in.
Yeah.
So it's worthwhile, and it is, it's a relationship building scene as well.
Yeah, right, because they're gonna build their uneasy partnership right now.
Yeah, right. And there's a great line in here where Clint, as Manco says he could possibly retire after the score. And I was just thinking of Clint Eastwood's current work schedule in his 90s. Just what a hilarious idea that is of Clint, even a character Clint is playing retiring seems hilarious to me.
Right.
But it's also interesting in terms of the next movie, because I guess that's an argument against them being the same guy, because he's got enough money to retire at the end of this movie, but he's still
going at it.
And also, but he's not. That's the other. We'll get there. But he's not a bounty hunter in the next movie. He's a con artist. So he's kind of not even doing the same job.
No, yeah.
Different name, different job.
If you put them out of order and you put Good, Bad, and Ugly at the beginning, he progresses to the most lethal to this movie.
I mean, maybe he's... Well, I guess that would be another argument for it being a prequel as well, because if the man with too many names still needs money, then it's a prequel.
Yeah, right.
Maybe it's like a Pulp Fiction thing where it actually ends with John Travolta getting machine gunned in the toilet.
Right,
in the toilet. That's the actual end of the story chronologically. Yeah. But this is where we start to get the hint that there'll be an emotional component to Mortimer's quest. But we're only kind of hinting at it at this point. It's it's about is it an indiscreet question? No, but the answer might be. So there's an idea that there's an emotional component at play here that we're not going to know about until we need to, and it's good that they're just peppering that in to sort of set the table for that, but they don't bring out the meal yet. To take the analogy to a pointless extreme.
Thank you.
I'd say going back to Cheers. I mentioned Frasier. I'll mention Cheers.
Yeah.
That when Clint is trying to describe how his rival post office worker is like Godzilla, and he said, and Frasier puts his hand on his shoulder and said, "Cliff, we all appreciate how hard you're working on this metaphor." This is this is what I've termed Kinky Leone, because we have El Indio's flashback here, which is like a scene from Peeping Tom, where he's like flashing back to when he's watching what turns out to be Mortimer's sister, fucking a guy, which as far as we know she has every right to do.
Yeah, right.
And he's just watching them have sex. And then pulls a gun on them. So it's like the idea of sexual sadism is pretty strong in this.
Yeah.
You see a lot of scenes like this in Leone's movies where they become sexually sadistic very quickly, almost out of nowhere.
Mm-hmm.
There's one in Once Upon a Time in the West that's the same, and then I think you probably heard about the one from Once Upon a Time in America has a fairly controversial rape scene in it that is up there with...
Oh, maybe I knew it one time, but I don't remember, yeah. I don't remember ever hearing about it.
Well, when you watch it... Oh, okay, interesting. When you watch... You'll know it when you see it.
Okay. Yeah, I assume so.
It's not something you could blink and miss. But I just think it's interesting that it's also so off the point of anything that's happening. Except, I guess the point is, and I don't know if you need, again, this for a modern movie, we've been complaining about the flashbacks, almost certainly, but I guess it establishes the idea that he's obsessed with this woman.
Yeah, absolutely, right.
Sexually, which is important because, well, is it? Yeah, I suppose it is important because he's got to have a reason.
Certainly important for him. I mean, he's carrying around that trinket. It seems to be what his whole being is about.
Yeah.
I also remember reading that the actor himself, what's his name? Volonte?
Mm-hmm.
That he and Leone started not getting along because Leone would... he would do outlandish...
Try to move his limbs?
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
But as an actor, I might object to that as well, you know?
Well, I remember reading something about...
I know how to move my fucking arm.
He would make a lot of interesting, wild choices...
Sure.
In both movies, the first movie and this movie, that Leone wasn't too keen on, and so he would make him do like 50 takes just to tire him out, so that he could calm the fuck down and give him the take that he wanted, which started to piss him off. But there are times I'm watching this movie where I think to myself, that must have been one of the tired takes. He looks exhausted.
And I just want to add to that, without knowing anything, Klaus Kinski was also on set. So I don't know if that added to the problem, but it certainly didn't help.
Right.
Again, another note, Clint's having so much fun here, the little wink he does after he sets off the dynamite.
For the jailbreak?
Yeah. It's fun Clint.
Yeah.
And actually, Fun Clint goes away for a long time, and he sort of again comes back in a few movies in the 90s and 2000s. But
yeah,
you know, Clint's not known for being fun,
right? But these movies show us he's actually funny.
fun and funny, right? Like almost like a kind of Wile E. Coyote sort of character sometimes. And again, the sharing and mutual lighting of cigarettes, that's Leone.
That was good. Yeah.
Playing in the sandpit of Hollywood, just Hollywood movie, not cliches, but conventions. When characters exchange objects, it means they're bonding or even, physically congressing. So it's kind of it's kind of interesting. Like the building blocks of the cinematic language of these movies is very American, but he's doing like an Italian twist on it, and filming it in Spain.
Yeah, right.
Also, what's great about what I really like about the pacing of these movies, and one of the reasons why they never feel overlong, even though they categorically might be, is just these like when the pace slows down, he throws in these kind of quick bursts of actions, like when the shooting of the gang suddenly out of nowhere. There's like these judicious rather than it kind of being one long action sequence over 2 hours. We have these judicious bursts of action that, and it stops it ever becoming one note to me. Pacing-wise,
for me too. But the other thing of note that I think is interesting is the one thing that this movie does that I really like is you're watching three people of intellect either work together or against each other in ways that fascinate me. Van Cleef and Eastwood make this kind of gamble. Well, if you break this guy out, then you're going to go rob this bank with El Indio. But then El Indio says, what I need you to do is go to this whole other town and rob that place, which puts Clint in a bind. And now he's got to take a risk, and his risk is to kill those three guys. But he still has to make it to that town and make it seem as though he's robbed the bank and then get back to the other town in time. And all of that, working...
masterful cross-cutting of lines of actions as well.
So amazing, yeah. But the way they inadvertently and purposefully sort of stunt each other in their quests, I think is really interesting to watch in this movie.
And then if you're comparing these movies, then does that mean that El Indio is Tuco in the dynamic? Because
I guess
it's the same in the next movie. They kind of stunt each other's quests.
Yeah, but Tuco is so interesting to me because I think he's every bit.
It's one of the great film characters.
As smart as these guys are, but he feels and looks like a dumbass.
Yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah, and it's like a I hadn't really thought about him. I mean, it's different as well because he's not positioned as one of a central trio.
Yeah,
he is very much the antagonist, even though Tuco is in abstract as much of an antagonist.
Yeah, of course.
As he is, right. But in the context of the movie, he doesn't feel like that. But that's interesting. That's kind of like they reinvented El Indio as Tuco.
Yeah, right.
For the next movie. Yeah, and there's a moment in here again which I think says it all about how it's impossible to be offended by the violence in these movies. When Lee Van Cleef shoots Clint
in the neck. Yeah.
And there is zero sense of mortal danger. There's no sense that this is anything other than like him like getting it's like a scratch on his neck. So
but what I like about it too is at first your emotion is you feel almost as angry as you think Clint is, but then when you see Clint realize that this is the thing that had to happen, that he's right.
Yeah.
And that he has to move on and not sort of do the cowboy thing of one for one. Now I got to shoot you because you shot me, motherfucker. It's, it comes together in a way in which, oh no, yeah, that's smart. He's smart. He's smarter than I thought. He might be as smart as I am.
And as well as the heist film, I mean, they're kind of, I mean, heist films are film noir and vice versa, but, the idea of not quite undercover cops infiltrating the gang of criminals, but I mean, they're undercover bounty hunters. But it's the similar idea, you know, like a White Heat kind of story where there's
or Infernal Affairs / Departed.
Well, sure, but that hasn't been made yet. But
White Heat has. Yeah, that's true.
And I'm sure there are other movies with like undercover cops in you know, infiltrating criminal gangs. So that doesn't feel like something that happens in westerns. That feels like something that happens more in gangster films,
gangster movies, right?
So, it's also interesting, like when the bandits try to test Monko by letting him kind of loose on this small town full of other bandits or other criminals. And it's sort of like, it's almost like they're putting him in a reenactment from A Fistful of Dollars.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost like they're sort of like, you know, prove yourself like you did in that last movie. Like go into this small town and insert yourself in there and kind of, you know, win over everyone, essentially. Like try and own this town like you did in that movie we saw you in.
Right.
So it worked on quite kind of a meta level of sequel reenacting a scene from the original movie.
But what I like about it too is
you don't get the sense they're the same characters who've had the same experiences necessarily.
Well, what I like about it too is that the thing that Clint gave away in the moment by shooting the apples isn't given to us by El Indio until much later.
Yeah, shouldn't have shot the apples off the tree.
Too good a shot to be anything other than a bounty killer or somebody who's gonna fuck my shit up.
Right. Yeah, and this is where you see Kinski's hump.
Yeah.
And you realize that he's kind of playing a character from German Expressionism, and they're just basically they've racially profiled him. By casting the German actor as, mind you, he will reinforce this racial profiling by later playing Nosferatu.
Yeah,
for instance, the key character of German Expressionism. So, yeah, and and again, I think that when they figure out. The scene where they're kind of like they're sort of sadistically torturing, is it Clint? It's Clint and Lee Van Cleef.
I think both, yeah.
And there's like cutaways to like montages of laughing faces, and I realized that, you know.
But that's also after he opens the safe, because I liked that sort of hook into the heist movie as well. This guy that's proficient, the guy
Only he can do it. Yes,
you don't have to just blow the doors off with dynamite and lose half your fucking loot. There are other things you can do.
Right.
Yeah.
But if you were gonna get offended by the violence, it would be the sadism of it, not the not how explicit it is, because there's no viscerality or gore to this violence, but. Like, the idea of, like, people getting off on watching other people hurt is very...
Well, because there's that real... This is a moment of sound that comes back again, because it's all... The beating is happening over El Indio's laughter.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
That sort of laugh soundscape.
Mm-hmm. Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's violence as torture, really. It's sort of like... That, you know, that's... It feels... When they kind of twist it into torture.
Mm-hmm. But that's the thing that's smart about it, because it's not the violence you're paying attention to, it's the sadism of the character.
Yeah.
His enjoyment of it. All right, why don't we take one more break, and then we'll come back.
Excellent. Great point to do that.
Fantastic. We'll be right back, everybody.
Did you know that the Everything Sequel podcast has a sequel? It's our Patreon, and for a low monthly donation, you can get up to 2 exclusive, full-length, ad-free bonus episodes. $5 a month gets you an episode discussing all the original movies from the series we've covered on the podcast. And that's a lot of snakeheads. But $10 a month scores you the reboot to boot. Support Everything Sequel on Patreon and reap the benefits of amazing brand new content you quite literally can't get anywhere else. Got more money than sense? We also offer one-time payments that will get you in the driver's seat of the podcast. Maybe even the passenger seat. That metaphor doesn't work, but our show does. So join the Patreon and believe the hype. It's a sequel.
And we're back, ladies and gentlemen. Tom and I are here, racing to the, 2.5 hour mark, maybe? We'll find out. Finishing up.
Oh,
for
maybe longer than the movie again.
Yeah, for a few dollars more.
We failed at Beat the Movie.
The 19 movie directed by Sergio Leone.
The 1960 magazine. You all remember the golden days of 1960.
That's good.
Well, my next note, the reason why I said that was such a good break is my next note really takes us into a different area. Because when Clint and Lee, I should say, if I'm going to use the first name of one, I should use the first name of the other. When they flip around the wall together when they're escaping, it's what struck me about, is this a buddy action movie as well?
Yeah, right.
Like, is this the building blocks of that too?
But what I also liked about it was because who is
it? Tango and Cash, having now seen that movie.
Finally. But what I also liked about it was it felt so noir to me after the laughing at soundscape beat up. And then they don't just escape, but Nino, a character, helps them escape. But you come to find out that it's El Indio having Nino do that. And then that he's working against his whole own gang. And then the priest from the next movie is going to figure that out.
The priest from the next movie. Well, he's also the guy, is it Nino? Is also the prison guard from the next movie.
Is that right? God damn it!
He's
I'm not even sure I noticed.
He plays a prison guard in most.
That's great.
He's the big guy, right? The big guy
the big guy. But in this movie, I think he's got a fucked up side of his face or something.
Yeah, he's got that in the next one too.
Oh, maybe it's his real face, and I'm being an asshole.
I think it's totally his real face, because that'd be weird to double up on that makeup.
Right. But at any rate, what I liked was how noir it felt.
I'll tell him you said that. I'll tell him you said you had a fucked up face.
I said, but anyway, and moved on.
Oh, he's long dead, let's face it.
So I can't be sued.
Yeah. That's an no, it's not an interesting question, but I suppose it's an errant thought of like how many people who involved in these movies are still alive. There can't be many. Clint.
That's
definitely Clint at the time of recording, bearing in mind this man as well.
Yeah, right.
90s. So if there's a trigger warning at the beginning of
the last time we saw him,
we recorded this before we knew about the death of Clint.
The last time we saw him for real was years ago, and even then he was talking to a chair on stage.
Every time I have to laugh, and every time I see a picture of him, because
he's gesturing back to the chair.
Well, no, he every time you see him, when he's directing, is it Juror number 2? Is that the name of the movie?
Yeah.
Or something like that, yeah. Because he's getting smaller and smaller, but he's wearing the same size clothes, so he's just like a bag of clothes.
Just a bag of clothes, yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, I like the noir aspect.
Yes, definitely. Well,
of all of that interplay.
Yeah, and I think it's noirish, definitely. It's also quite kind of operatic, right? The idea of schemes within schemes, betrayals within betrayals. It's a very kind of Italian melodrama kind of feel to it. But this is where I feel it starts to meander a little bit. Like the pacing is deliberately slow, but there are some sequences in here that kind of outstay their welcome a little bit. It's the only time it really happens in the movie, but I started to feel it.
Which one? What are we talking about? Like,
well, just because there's so many schemes within schemes and portrayals within portrayals. There's a lot of back and forth.
They have to unravel all of them.
They have to unravel all of that, okay. And you're just like, yeah, it could cut. This is, this feels like those added-on scenes from Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. So like, I don't need to know.
I don't know. He sends the group after him. One guy outsmarts him. So you're saying cut the bit about the guy outsmarting that bit? Just let him go with the group?
I didn't just tighten it all up, but you can have the same sequences, just tighten it up a little bit. But
okay,
it's the only moment where I really felt that.
What's his name? Groggy, I think.
Groggy, yes.
Yeah.
There's a great fake out here with the clothes model and the spinning chair.
Yeah,
which I feel like is this movie's version of the bulletproof vest.
Yeah, absolutely.
They felt like they had to. I was like, we got to top the bulletproof vest.
You know what's what's funny about the bulletproof vest? It's so iconic. I thought for sure if you'd asked, because it's been so long since I seen these movies, I'm like, yeah, that's in Good and Bad, and the Good and the Bad and the Ugly, right?
Oh, it's too simple for Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
It would need to be like,
right.
I don't know, like a Civil War stretcher that he had underneath his shirt. So it would have to be something about gangrene. It couldn't be.
There's a moment in that movie when they're carrying the dynamite to the bridge,
mm-hmm.
and they put it down to pretend to pick up a body, and then some guy passes, and they just...
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, sentimentality about war deaths only gets you so far in The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
They gotta keep, literally, they've got their eye on the prize.
Right.
So I just love that, and I mean, I think it's fair to say that The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly has like a million of those moments as well. Like kind of too many to count, but this is the one that kind of stood out to me. Yeah, and it's interesting as well because we go back to, we're sort of reconstructing through flashback how El Indio and Mortimer are linked and who this woman is in relation to both of them.
Does that come after they kill all the henchmen though?
Yeah, I think so. But it also, I mean,
I like that the henchman killing thing all felt classic Western.
Mm-hmm.
I like that.
And, yeah, absolutely. Classic Western, classic war movie.
Yeah.
Heist movie as well. They all tend to...
Sure.
To disappear after the robbery. But, I mean, this, again, like, the way that El Indio's obsession with this woman is represented, like, it's so psychologized, right? It's like pure... It's very Freudian. And 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 they'll do this in a subsequently here with Mortimer, and where you see that he's acting according to his emotions when you think he's just acting in his professional capacity up to this point.
Well, because there's even that small moment when I think the gang is they're kind of hiding within the town, and the gang is coming towards them. And he looks at Clint at that one moment, and he says, "Save El Indio for me."
Mm-hmm.
And even though that's all he says, it's like Clint knows why. He's communicated enough to know something else is going on, and I'm going to give that guy to you.
But this is kind of a testing ground for what they do with Tuco in the next movie. And I can't believe I didn't link what they do with El Indio here to that.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I did in my notes, but I didn't
not
think
previously.
About being... Well, I wrote it in my notes because it's the same thing where you take essentially like a one-dimensional villain, and then you give them something that gives them depth and dimension.
Yeah.
They do it with Tuco in the next movie with his kind of backstory with his brother and growing up in poverty.
Yeah, right.
But here, that making it his obsession with this woman, like it's not that, she's just another whore that he threw away.
Right.
Or like a woman he just kind of raped and threw away. And that's why Mortimer wants It's a woman that he was so obsessed with he accidentally killed her. Or she...
Well,
whatever. Yeah. She tried to kill him and she killed herself.
But do you think that's what it was? Because the camera shot itself, you don't see. And so to me it was I don't want to live as a woman who's been raped by this man.
Oh, she just straight up killed herself?
And she just straight up killed herself.
Oh, I thought she was trying to go for him and she killed him, but Mortimer was kind of taking revenge on the fact that
hard to miss.
She made him do that. Huh?
Hard to miss.
But why wouldn't she just... Oh, because
it's either your body or his body. You know what I mean?
That makes... I forgot this movie was made by a Catholic director, so that level of guilt makes total sense.
Yeah.
That level of guilt and shame completely squares with what Leone's probably
But the other part of it that's, really terrible and gross about it is El Indio's... The characterization of that character is as though he wanted to keep her forever.
Yeah.
And keep raping her. Because he was in love with her in his mind, I assume.
Right. Yeah, and it's not... It like, with Tuco, you see a different side of the character. It's not that you see a different side of the character here, but it's developed psychologically in a way that perhaps you're kind of not expecting necessarily here, but you might expect in a Michael Powell movie or an Alfred Hitchcock movie.
The other thing that's interesting is it feels like the director himself is giving it more depth. Just by the way he's, obviously he's giving a performance there in the way he's, sort of longingly looking into the past.
Yeah.
But it feels as though Leone's giving us even more of that sense of the depth of his persona than the actor himself.
And he's using the way it's been done in classic cinema, like the red flashes remind me of Vertigo.
Yeah.
Or Rear Window, which is all about voyeurism and obsession. And reminds me of the way Michael Powell uses red, and the way Martin Scorsese would subsequently imitate Michael Powell using red, which was hilarious because Michael Powell saw Mean Streets and said, "Too much red," and Scorsese says, "Well, I got it from you.
Just doing you.
Just doing you." It's like, how dare the director of the Red Shoes tell me that? And then we're into the showdown.
Yeah.
Or should I say slowdown? Because it's...
Oh, this is too much for you?
No, not at all. This is not enough.
Okay.
But it's very purposefully playing with the idea of time and distance. Using direction and editing, and again, this is something that will be tripled down on for Good, the Bad, and the Ugly.
Yeah.
But once again, it's setting the table for that because it's another 3-way gunfight.
Right.
So they're playing with all the same. It's like a rehearsal for the finale of Good, the Bad, and the Ugly because they're doing the same thing where they're trying to maintain multiple perspectives within one scene. Point of view works on 3 different levels.
Yeah. But I also like the added component of when you're thinking kind of about the last moments of your life. I mean, El Indio's very much into that, watching somebody look at him in the last moments of their life as he holds his...
Oh, that's a very Peeping Tom quality, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah.
But I like that Clint extends it. By the time that one's running out, he opens up Mortimer's to keep his time going, and he sort of levels the playing field.
Yeah,
because El Indio is always going to give you a chance, but it's not really a fair chance.
No, and again, that's...
Put the gun on the ground, and then I'll let you go for it.
I can't believe I didn't see Tuco in him, because that's...
right.
Clint anticipates that Tuco... he should give Tuco an unloaded gun, just in case. But, it is, effectively, this scene transforms a movie that we thought was about bounty hunters getting their man into a revenge
into a revenge story.
And that's hidden from both the audience and Clint up until and Clint's character up until this point. This is where, via the watch he.
But I feel like there's a moment where he saw the picture earlier, and that's how he.
Yeah.
Knew to take the pocket watch in the first place, and kind of.
Yeah, he's figuring it out.
Yeah.
But it's kind of at the same time as the audience, really, because he's sort of like, he knows that they're related, but. He might not know how until Lee Van Cleef says they're brother and sister.
Yeah, right.
Like he might be, or they might be man and wife, or like. So the detective work is kind of going on with the audience at the same time that Clint's figuring it out. So he's a kind of surrogate detective.
Yeah, right.
For this movie, but it's a beautiful moment when you see tears in Lee Van Cleef's eyes.
Yeah,
sounds like an 80s like
teardrops in Van Cleef's eyes.
Teardrops in Lee Van Cleef's eyes. And that I've said this before, and I will say it again because it's even more impressive in this movie, which in so many ways is big and overblown. But the holding back and the restraint of emotion is just it just works so much better.
Yeah.
And again, you're watching his eyes throughout the movie, and then at the very end of the movie, you get this glistening of tears in his eyes.
Right.
So, again, it's using eyes to tell the story, whether it's emotional or narrative.
Sure.
So I think it's really beautifully handled in a far more nuanced way than you expect. And these movies keep doing that, where just when you think they've reached like such an excessive level of representation, they'll pull it back to something that feels really real and human.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's what people really like about Once Upon a Time in the West and Once Upon a Time in America, that they're these big genre movies, these big history movies. But they're also movies about small handfuls of people and their relationships to each other. So it's clearly something that Leone is very good at.
Sure.
Doing. And this is so we tease another sequel at this point because they talk about whether they're going to get together again, and he says maybe next time.
Yeah. So
each movie's kind of building out well, that's the other thing we didn't talk about is the sequel logic of the sequel equation of you add Van Cleef to Clint Eastwood, and then when you get to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, you add Eli Wallach.
Yeah, right.
So each you're building out the cast as you go.
Yeah, but it's interesting because when you
add another character.
Yeah, because you keep adding central characters.
Yeah, true.
But for the people that are in all three movies, it's only Clint, and then a lot of secondary, smaller actors or characters. You know?
But it seemed like that's
El Indio doesn't make it through all three. Van Cleef doesn't make it through all three.
Right.
And Wallach, of course, is there for only one, but in such a big way. His imprint feels like it's on the whole series.
Sure.
Yeah.
Kinski, too.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of, this sequels like a series like Lethal Weapon, where they just keep adding characters. And so like by the fourth one you've got,
poster gets pretty crowded.
It gets pretty crowded. Chris Rock and is it Jet Li? Or
Rene Russo and Chris Rock, and you've already got from number 2 you got Joe Pesci, so
So it's why in a way I like the idea that they would die at the beginning of Once Upon a Time in the West, because that's like drawing a line under it in terms of the cast expansion. Yeah, and they end on a very Python-esque image of him riding off with a cart full of the dead.
Yes.
Which feels very, very Holy Grail.
Yeah.
Like really absurdist. Well, it's kind of interesting because
Holy Grail, that'll be in our lives soon.
Yeah, absolutely. Would we ever do the Monty Python movies as a series? Do they count as sequels? Probably not.
Well, we can make up our own rules.
We do whatever the fuck we want. Well, but it's an inversion of because you get Lee Van Cleef riding off into the sunset, which is the classic American Western ending. But it's immediately followed by Clint riding off with a cart full of dead people. Which you don't see a lot in westerns. It doesn't,
especially like
a man with a barrow full of dead people.
Isn't it Groggy who sort of spread eagled in the back of the cart?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and as well, you get that great, and it was my first quotable for the last episode, that we have this sort of final scare moment.
Yeah.
It's done entirely. It's not done to shock. It's done entirely comedically, because we've had this sort of running gag of, we've had this running gag of them counting, because they're because they're bounty hunters, so these are their accounts, right? They're
exactly.
Oh, we hadn't talked about that. The discussion they had where they're like deciding whether it's more profitable to go.
One main big guy or all the small guys.
Again, it's like they are thinking in capitalist terms.
Well, plus on the capitalism factor, just the fact that he's thrown all these dead bodies into the back of a cart, but all he can see them as is money.
Right, completely, yes.
Because he's counting up how much they're worth.
Yeah, exactly. The value of human life is its monetary value.
Yeah, right? Exactly. But we didn't talk about this. I also love that this movie doesn't make too big of a deal out of because they're stealing the gold, or not the gold, but the money out of the safe. Clint and Van Cleef, and when they're crawling out of the building, and Clint's like, "Uh-oh, they're fucking right below us," and he just throws the money on the tree that nobody sees, that nobody knows about.
Yeah.
And it's never really referred to. I mean, Indio goes back with his partner and then unlocks the safe and sees that everything's just gone except his laughing wanted poster. But I like that that doesn't become a sticking point for the plot at all until he just goes back and takes the money off the fucking tree, and off he goes with his dead bodies.
Yeah, and I mean that's fun screenwriting as well. It's sort of like there's a great sitcom called Black Books, which is about a bookstore. Do you know the actor Dylan Moran? He's in Shaun of the Dead, and anyway, he's
not Irish, the other main guy, comedian. Right?
No, he's not Nick Frost. He's the
Frost, yeah.
He's the roommate of his girlfriend, who is secretly in love with his girlfriend. But anyway, in one of the episodes, they do a classic sitcom thing where at the beginning of the episode, he's having breakfast, and the jam he's having on this toast is disgusting, and he throws it up in the ceiling. And this is like the very beginning of the episode, and then the entire episode goes, everything plays out, and then just at the very end, the toast lands back on his head. After everything else has been resolved, it's just him in the same spot, and the toast falls back on his head. So it's kind of that kind of screenwriting, I think.
That's good.
Yeah.
Well, credit check.
Can't help you out, I'm afraid. With the well, I mean, I did. There was one. I think I did one about the titles, maybe. The only thing I noticed, and I don't know if this is how people would originally see the movie, so I don't know if it's even a legitimate credit check or just added on, but the movie just ends.
Yeah.
But then you have the music on a black screen for a few seconds.
Yeah, that's true.
And I don't know enough to know whether that's just a kind of the way the movie's represented, or that was a choice to do it that way. Because if it's a choice, it makes total sense to just allow the audience a moment with the music alone.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to be alone with the music
before I have to get up.
And the respect for the score, and the idea of using it in a theatrical sense, where it's like the way you have an overture before the program starts.
Yeah.
You're just kind of sitting with the music for a few minutes. So I'm not sure whether it's original, but if it is, it makes total sense.
Yeah. Can I ask a question? Because I'm confusing all the movies. Just to go back to the killing of El Indio for a moment. Does he do the thing he does in the first movie? And does he do it in the last movie? But I like when Leone kind of takes the camera and rolls it.
Oh, yeah, he likes
that sort of dying body moment that he gets sometimes. But I'm confusing which movie it's in. I know it's in the first one.
It's in the third. I mean, there's just 2 moments in the third one where he does that as well. So 2 separate moments.
But I think he does it with El Indio here too, doesn't he?
I don't remember, but quite certainly. He's certainly interested in this idea of using the camera experientially.
Yeah.
Without, the tinnitus thing that everyone does now.
Agreed.
So that's it. I mean, that's as good as you're going to get.
Well, there's nothing else.
There's no credits. There's no credits to check, so therefore there is no credit check.
I mean, we had plenty of time. We could have gone on lots more tangents.
Plenty of time according to whose clock? Whose
Mine.
Oh, okay.
We're only at 5 minutes. Let me go back to all 2 hours.
Let me go to all. Let me go back to all those tangents you taught me out of. Then.
I'm not.
Here's why Roy Lichtenstein is my favorite artist. Yeah. No, I think it's it definitely, compared to Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, this movie definitely goes under the radar more. But that's kind of exactly what I like about it. It's still a really special movie, but in a much more understated way.
Yeah, I think that's what I like about it. I don't.
Yeah. I mean, it's the 2 movies work so well together because you really don't feel like you're covering any of the same ground, even though you got the same actors, possibly the same characters,
right.
The same genre, the same essential setup.
Right.
So I think you want every film series to have sequels this different, I think.
Sure. I mean, and that's
for the variety and the richness of the series.
Right. It's one of those things where you think about it and the blueprint was made so early. And sequels don't follow it.
Right.
That's why you like Halloween 3 so much. It's connected to Monty Python, and now for something completely different.
I think so. I think the ability to do that within a film series that demands repetition, to fail to meet that demand is kind of a true artistic move. That's the sign of a true artist, to go, no, I'm gonna reinvent the wheel here again, and then I'm gonna reinvent it again. It's gonna be a different wheel next time. It's gonna be a wheel with 3 spokes instead of 2.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. So that's true artistry, right? That's
absolutely.
No, to go back to Python, nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition.
So good.
Yeah, that's a good one.
All right. That's it, ladies and gentlemen. You're going to have to tell us what you think of the film. Is it your top or is it your bottom? One way or another, it's top notch. I'll tell you that much.
It's one or the other.
Yeah,
you got a 50-50 chance.
All right. So tell us what you think about For a Few Dollars More. Do the things and do them where you do them, on the books, on the grams, on the skis, on the X's, on the tubes.
When you were going through those, I was like, what's he going to do for YouTube? And it's like, oh no, he's going to say tubes. And I don't want to hear him say tubes.
Fallopian tubes.
Exactly.
I know what you were thinking about.
Yeah. That YouTube, the U-shaped tubes. I guess they are shaped like a Y as well, aren't they? Fallopian tubes.
All right, settle down.
Anyway, Roy Lichtenstein. Speaking of fallopian tubes.
No tangents.
I guess that would be Georgia O'Keeffe. She was the vagina artist.
Of course she was.
She did she drew flowers, but the flowers were awfully vaginal. Awfully big vaginas. To quote Frank.
6'2". Awfully big vagina.
Awfully big vaginas.
Or send an email to everythingsequel@gmail.com.
You hadn't even finished. I'm sorry.
We can start making that a running gag. That's twice now. When you hear us next, we're going to be talking about the same year, apparently. And we'll be talking about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yet another 19 film.
And at least one child went through puberty between the two movies as well.
Yeah.
Because that kid who takes Clint to the hotel is manning the mule wheel.
Yeah.
At the beginning of the movie, and he's about 3 feet taller.
And there's two of them, because one I mistook for him. The one that gets killed isn't him, right?
He doesn't get killed. His older brother gets killed.
But they look an awful lot alike, to the point where I thought maybe that's his actual real brother.
Well, there's as Mortimer says, there's generally a resemblance between brother and sister.
Yeah. But then the other kid walked in, and I'm like, no, that's the kid. That's the one.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's it. Yeah, you're going to hear us next time. So long. Say goodbye to everybody, Tom.
I guess I better leave before you go and lose your temper.
He's fucking funny.
All of these are like Clint zingers.
Yeah.
Clint cleanses. Clingers. Colonel Clingers. There we go. That's what we'll call them. Clingers. He's got a bunch